Credit crunch, economic downturn, recession, words we're all too familiar with. Britain as a whole is suffering, and many people are at breaking point.
That money was for my retirement. There's nothing left now.
While banks have been bailed out by the government, little has been filtered down to customers.
Banks obviously aren't treating a lot of their customers fairly.
Many credit card companies have increased rates and charges, or both.
The credit card companies, they've got to have a sustainable business.
Is it right that credit card providers are allowed to hike up rates as much as they like? Are providers really treating customers fairly? A study by Which that looked at 42 major credit card brands found that over the past year, a whopping 64% of them have increased their rates or other charges. This includes well-known names many of us have come to rely upon, like Royal Bank of Scotland, NatWest and HSBC. Other providers, such as American Express, have also hiked up rates for existing customers.
Existing customers are seeing their rates being put up, and that doesn't hit the headline advertised rates. So we think credit card companies are making more profit out of existing customers at the same time as taking on new customers at special rates, which then go up in the future.
65-year-old Wendy Wright and her 62-year-old husband John have been finding it hard to cope with mounting debt after losing their family business earlier this year. Seeing the rates on their credit cards increase dramatically has added to the burden.
Most of the cards were round about the 16.5%, and they've gradually gone up now to
27, 28,
28%. And in one or two cases, they're charging something like 37%.
Well, what we found is actually the rates have stayed roughly the same, within about 0.5% of what they were a year ago. But if you think base rate's gone down to 0.5% when it was 5%, not much more than a year ago, the rate that banks lend to each other at has plummeted. So rates should be coming down, but they're not. I've seen lots of little sneaky sort of tricks coming in. So things like the number of days to pay has dropped. The number of interest-free days on purchases has dropped. Things like balance transfer fees. You used to be able to transfer a balance with no charge, and now it's 3% pretty much across the board. So even 0% deals aren't really 0% deals anymore. So they're just reducing the good side and increasing the negative side as just a way of not increasing headline APRs.
We're currently being ripped off with the interest rates, which are phenomenal, and we can't do anything about it.
Despite the high rates, John and Wendy managed to keep up with their payments until August this year, when Wendy had an angina attack and ended up in hospital.
We've been paying them £1,000 a month, and last month was the first month we missed, and we missed that because I was ill.
But John and Wendy are not the only ones noticing rates creeping up. Peter Pandelis, a 33-year-old teacher from North London, was shocked when he got a letter from Virgin in July saying it was going to increase its rate by 9%.
They sent me a letter saying, if you would like to continue having a 24.9% interest rate, please let us know by the 1st of August. Otherwise, we're going to make it 33.9. If you would like to keep the 24.9, you have to close your card and pay us off monthly. So I was not impressed.
We contacted Virgin regarding Peter's letter, and this was their response.
We regularly review individual customers' interest rates, and on occasion, as a result of these reviews, we may adjust the pricing on certain accounts, both up and down. The rate we give represents a fair price for the product and service that we provide.
It had excuse written all over it. I looked at every single point, and not one of them was a valid reason. A 9% increase, it's higher than inflation rate. It's much higher than the base rate. The base rate hasn't been as low as it is now for half a century.
Well, we've just seen the Ombudsman figures for the last 6 months published when complaints have gone up massively. So banks obviously aren't treating a lot of their customers fairly. Things are having to go to the Ombudsman service, and then they're making the ruling.
So exactly how much have credit card complaints gone up? I went to see Emma Parker from the Financial Ombudsman Service to find out.
Well, last year it was the second highest area of complaint. It is quite a substantial number. Last year we had nearly 19,000 cases. So it is certainly something where many consumers have credit cards and possibly in the current circumstances are finding that maybe payments are tighter than they realised or there are problems. But obviously there are a lot of other people out there with credit cards who aren't complaining, who may be happy with the service they're getting.
But while some people might be happy with their credit cards, the concern is that their official complaints figures is just a drop in the ocean, as many people never get around to making a complaint at all or give up halfway through.
Letters we wrote to one of the banks, we said that why is the interest rate so high when the savings rate is only 0.5%? And we haven't actually had an answer to that.
No, I don't think they've ever answered that letter.
Regardless of the real number of unhappy customers, it's clear that this is a growing problem as the number of credit card complaints has increased by over 600% in the last 2 years. Do you think providers are treating customers fairly?
I think so, yes. I don't see any reason why they should be accused of not treating customers fairly. These businesses do actually have to operate at a profit, and the credit card companies are operating at the moment at a very slim profit, and they've got to have a sustainable business. There's a sort of underlying misconception here that in some way credit card interest rates are related to base rates. Whilst base rates have sort of fallen off a cliff at the beginning of the year, what we've actually seen on the credit card market is actually a small increase in rates from what was actually a historic low a couple of years ago of about 14% APR. It's edged up towards 16%. Now, the reason for that is that the base rate and the cost of funding credit cards is just one component of how a credit card price is set. So whilst base rate is one element of price that has fallen, most of the other cost elements that are built into pricing have actually been rising steadily.
So, it looks like credit card providers are basically squeezing more money out of customers because they are struggling financially. So you're saying they are doing this because they are in trouble?
Well, to make sure they stay in business, yes.
In January 2009, the government introduced new rules which allow cardholders who have seen their rates increase to cancel their card and pay the outstanding amount at the old rates. Card providers are also no longer allowed to put up the rate in the first year of someone holding a card, and after that, they can't increase it more than once every 6 months.
What they were designed to do was to ensure that people weren't faced with a shock, if you like, in terms of their rate increasing on an existing debt that they were already carrying.
Are the new rules enough?
We've seen some really good moves. So things like they're not allowed to put your rate up more than twice a year. I mean, it's a good first step, but it's not enough because there's no rule saying how much they can put your interest rate up by. So if they put it up by 5% twice a year, that's a massive increase.
Despite the rules trying to protect customers from high increases, at the moment, there's no limit on how much providers can hike up the rates.
No, unfortunately, that's one place where we couldn't actually go. Once you get into that sort of area, then you quickly run into trouble around competition law. So that was one thing that we weren't actually able to agree at the time.
The competitive market should keep the rates down. It's just at the moment, because not many companies are lending hugely, banks have really cut down on the amount they want to lend to consumers. There's less choice, so they can keep their rates fairly artificially high. But once the market starts freeing up again, lending becomes a bit more free. Hopefully that will force rates down, so it won't be an issue.
With the vast majority of us having at least one credit card, the chances are that many people have fallen victim to rate rises and increased charges.
It's not just affecting people who've always been struggling, it's affecting others as well. This is proving to be the bank's greed.
I'm in a position where I'm very fortunate and I appreciate that. I've got a secure job, a secure income, a full-time contract. I smiled. I was disgusted, obviously, and I like a good deal. And when Virgin came up with this excuse of a letter and pitiful reasons, I cancelled it as soon as I could.
That money that I used to pay the banks off last year was for my retirement. They've taken all that. There's nothing left now.
What can people do if their credit card provider suddenly increases their rate? Is there a way they can fight back?
Well, if you do think they've increased the rates unfairly, and obviously the new principles do set out quite clearly what credit card providers should be doing, but if you feel that your credit card provider isn't treating you fairly, complain in the first instance to the provider of the credit, explain why you're unhappy and what you want them to do to put things right. They have 8 weeks to try and sort things out, but if that doesn't resolve things, the Financial Ombudsman Service is a free service that you can call and we'll try and help.
It doesn't look like credit card providers are going to be changing their tack anytime soon, so don't take it lying down. Use your consumer rights to highlight any issues to the correct authorities. And if you still feel your loyalties are being taken for granted, then vote with your feet and look for a better deal elsewhere.
Just keep an eye on what else is out there in the market. If your provider does something you don't like, challenge them on it. Just don't roll over and accept the charges.